$1,516.32. It lands at 5:41, same time it always does, while you're standing in a parking lot before sunrise, badge still clipped to your scrub top. You don't open the app to check it. You already know the number before you look. 11 minutes ago you were finishing a 12-hour shift. Now you're just a phone buzzing in the cold. And behind that number is $310.44, the amount that was supposed to hold on until this exact minute. Not panic exactly. Something quieter than that, the kind that doesn't even look like anything from the outside. For about 4 seconds, you are richer than you have been in 2 weeks. 4 seconds. Then it starts moving. Not because you moved it, because something in you already decided where every dollar goes, days before you ever got paid, and you were never in the room when it happened. That part never gets explained when you take the job. Nobody tells you the deciding already happened, days before you were ever hired, back when whatever this is first learned your name. Walking to your car, badge still warm from 12 hours under fluorescent light, is the first quiet minute you get. Dana's walking the same direction, same $23.50 an hour, 3 years in the same wing as you. Dana's car is 2 years old. Yours is a 2013 sedan with 148,000 miles on it, and you clock that number today specifically for reasons you can't quite name yet. You don't compare on purpose. It just happens. Your eyes land on the newer car before they land on your own, and something quiet in you does the comparison anyway, without ever telling you what it adds up to. Somebody else on the unit is always mid-scroll on a break, holding up a boarding pass, a hotel balcony, a kitchen that isn't rented. Nobody says the number out loud. You don't ask. You just feel a version of yourself get slightly smaller for 4 or 5 seconds, then go back to normal, the way you've trained yourself to. Someone asks if you saw the pictures later in the shift. You say you did. You didn't. Not really. But agreeing is faster than explaining why scrolling that far into somebody else's trip felt like more effort than you had left in you. By the time you're home, the sun is out doing something you're not awake enough to enjoy. You eat something you didn't plan to eat. Not because you were hungry exactly, because deciding what to cook felt like a second job stacked on top of the first one, and there was a kiosk on the way that took $2.65 off your card without either of you discussing it. You sleep in pieces. 4 hours, then 2, then a nap that wasn't on the schedule. Somewhere in that stretch, half awake, phone lit up in a dark room, you place an order you don't fully remember placing. $27.84 shows up later like a fact about someone else's day. You don't remember choosing it so much as remember being too tired to choose anything else. This isn't a one-time thing. It repeats itself in some shape almost every week. Different order, different amount, same basic pattern underneath it. Coffee here, delivery there, a ride instead of a walk when the walk would have been fine. None of it lands as a decision in the moment. All of it lands as a decision later, on the statement, where it's too late to argue with. None of this feels like spending while it's happening. That's the part that matters. It feels closer to breathing, in and out, no decision attached to either one. Here's a question worth sitting with for a second. What if the tiredest hour of your day is exactly the hour everything around you is built to be most convincing? You go back in for the next shift, the same way you left the last one. Badge, car, 12 hours ahead of you. 24 hours have now passed since $1,516.32 landed at 5:41. Out of habit, more than curiosity, you open the app again in the parking lot. You know the number that's supposed to be sitting in there. You watched it land 11 hours ago from a parking lot exactly like this one. You almost don't look. $1,382.71. You stare at it the way you'd stare at a bill that doesn't add up and still have to pay anyway. Not angry. Exactly. Just confused about where the gap came from, because nothing you bought would ever get called a mistake on its own. A coffee. Dinner you didn't cook. A few minutes of not having to think. Purchased over and over, each one too small to ever register as spending. $133.61 gone in one lap around the clock. And $88.17 of it, more than half, disappeared in the 2 hours right after your shift ended, back when your body had nothing left in it to argue with anything. That's the detail nobody warns you about going into a job like this. It's never the one bad afternoon. It's never a single purchase you'd point to and call the problem. It's a version of you that shows up exhausted on a schedule anyone could predict, making the exact same small trade at the exact same low point, over and over, until it stops looking like a pattern and starts looking like just who you are, at least for 24 hours at a time. Money for permission to stop thinking, spent at the 1 hour you have the least ability to think straight anyway. If you recognize that trade, leave the word permission below. Subscribing helps if you'd rather have a cost like this caught before it reaches the hour you have the least say over yourself, not after it's already been spent. It's still just an hour you never got to think clearly in. You didn't get robbed by anyone. You got tired on a loop, and something out there learned exactly when to charge you for it, down to the hour. Which means the real question was never how much this job pays you an hour. It's what happens to that money in the minutes you have the least say over anything, including yourself. So you do the thing you've been putting off for months. Not because today feels different, because you have 45 minutes between 2 shifts and nowhere left to hide from your own bank statement. You've told yourself you'd get to this eventually, the way you tell yourself a lot of things during a night shift, promises made to a version of you that never actually shows up. Curtains are drawn, even though it's the middle of the afternoon. Sleep during daylight only works if the room is dark enough to pass for night, and today it is. You open 3 months of transactions and start sorting them into 2 columns. Need. Everything else. Most of it sorts itself instantly. You already know which column something belongs in the second your eyes land on it. Except for one category. That one takes longer, because it doesn't look like anything on its own, only in a group. The big items sort themselves in about 4 seconds. Rent, $935. Utilities, $124. Groceries, $372. The car, gas and insurance together, $238. Phone, $48. 5 lines, no debate, no grey area. Add them up and you get $1,717 a month, standing there in the need column, smaller than you thought it would look once it was finally written down instead of just felt. The hard part is everything sitting in the gap between the 2 columns, not the rent, not the groceries, the stuff you buy specifically because you're too tired to do the thing that would have been free. A ride when the walk would have been fine. Dinner delivered when there was food in the fridge. A handful of small subscriptions that exist purely so you never have to decide anything twice. You end up giving that category a name, just for yourself, so it stops looking like nothing, buying back energy. Every dollar in it exists for one reason. So you don't have to spend the version of you that's running on empty. You don't call that waste. Not exactly. It doesn't feel like waste when it's happening. It feels like the only decision available at the time. Here's the part that actually stops you for a second, longer than anything else on the page. $1,717 is 52.3% of what actually lands in your account every month. Just over half. You'd have guessed higher. You'd have guessed the number that makes the whole thing feel impossible, the number that gives you permission to stop looking. It isn't that number. There's a small, specific kind of embarrassment in that. Not because the number is bad, because it's so simple. And you're only finding it now, sitting in a dark room on your one afternoon off at 31 years old. Which means the story you've been telling yourself, the one where there's nothing left over, was never actually about the rent. The gap between the 2 columns, the part that isn't survival and isn't nothing either, comes out to $442.94 a month. You don't say anything out loud when you see it. There's nowhere to say it to. You just sit there for a second with the curtains drawn, the number on the screen, and the particular kind of quiet that comes from realizing the leak was never where you thought you'd find it. None of that half actually disappeared. It just sat there, never assigned to anything, waiting on a decision nobody had gotten around to making. And unassigned money never really sits still for long. It finds a job to do on its own, usually the wrong one, unless you get there first. So you get there first. $150 out of every check, moved before you're awake enough to talk yourself out of it, into an account you don't look at unless you have to. You don't think of it as saving, not really. Saving sounds like a plan with an ending. This is closer to setting something down somewhere it can't be reached by mistake. You set it up once, on a day off, and never touch the settings again. That's the whole trick. It only works if it happens before you're awake enough to have an opinion about it. Months pass the way night shift, months do, one long stretch that only breaks into pieces later when you try to remember it. By the 4th month of doing this without missing a single transfer, there's $1,214.08 sitting in that account you don't look at. You still don't look at it. That's kind of the point. Then, on a Tuesday, you're asleep at 11 in the morning when the bedroom stops being cold. Not dramatically, just a fan that used to hum quietly enough to sleep through, gone silent instead. By the time you actually wake up, the room is 84 degrees and climbing, and you're doing the math on how many hours of daylight sleep you have left before the next shift starts, which is none, because the math already ran out. You ever notice how the body decides these things happen at the worst possible hour, every single time, like it's coordinating with something? Here's where the old version of this story would start. You know, the shape of it before it even happens. Which bill gets pushed a few days? Which card absorbs it? How many weeks you spend quietly paying yourself back for a decision you made in 20 minutes, half asleep, at noon. You remember the last time something like this happened, 2 years ago, before any of this existed. That one took 6 weeks to pay off, and a version of you that didn't sleep right for most of it. Except this time, none of that happens. The repair runs $412, a fan motor and a recharge. The kind of bill that used to mean picking a different problem to create somewhere else. Instead, it comes out of the account you've been not looking at, the one nobody but you knew existed. $802.08 left. That's it. That's the whole story. No crisis, no panic, no decision about which future version of you gets to absorb this one. Just a number that goes down, on its own, in an account built for exactly this and nothing else. You keep waiting for the feeling you're used to having in moments like this. It doesn't show up, not relief exactly, and not nothing either. Something closer to the quiet after a sound you were braced for finally doesn't happen, which means the sleep you actually needed that afternoon, the thing a broken fan was about to take from you along with $412, got protected too. Nobody talks about that part. They talk about emergency funds like they're only for the money. They never mention that the real thing sitting behind that number is your ability to close your eyes at noon without your whole day unraveling over a fan motor. That's the part that was never really about the $150 a check. It was about buying back the one thing a night shift already takes enough of. Your ability to just stop for a few hours without anything falling apart while you do. Not once. Not that afternoon, and not any of the ones that came before it. The debts from before all of this started are still there, sitting exactly where you left them. Getting better at everything else didn't make them lighter. It just made you more aware of exactly how heavy they still are. Card has been around since your first year in this job, back when you didn't know any better and needed tires more than you needed a plan. Card B is newer, and it grew the way these things always grow, one reasonable purchase attached to another, until reasonable stopped being the right word for it. 2 cards, if you're being honest about it. One from years ago, small, mostly forgotten. $842, sitting at 16.90%. The other one is newer and bigger, and the number next to it stopped feeling real a long time ago. $2,910 at 24.99%. You know the second number matters more than the first one. You've known that for a while. Knowing it and acting on it have never been the same thing. Dana's back at it on break, this time with something new clipped to a wrist, paid for the way most things get paid for now. 18 easy payments, barely anything a month, basically free if you don't think about it too hard. Dana says that last part out loud, laughing, and you laugh too, because it's easier than saying what you're actually thinking. Nobody on the unit asks how the payments actually add up over 18 months. Nobody ever does the math out loud. That's sort of the whole business model. You go home, you don't buy anything that day, but the thought doesn't leave with you. It comes back at 4:12 in the morning, in the exact hour your judgment is at its weakest. There's a mattress you've wanted for longer than you'd admit, and blackout curtains to go with it, the kind that might actually fix the sleep problem instead of just managing around it. $1,150 split into 18 payments, $63.89 a month. Barely anything, the same way Dana's wrist barely cost anything. You've been sleeping badly for months now, and you know exactly why. The room gets too hot by mid-morning no matter what you do to it. A better mattress and real blackout curtains would fix the actual problem instead of just surviving it. And $63 a month is less than what you'd spend eating out because you're too exhausted to cook anyway. The math starts building itself a case. You've earned it. You need the sleep more than most people need anything. $63 is nothing next to what a bad night costs you in mistakes the next day. It's a good case. It almost wins. What stops it isn't willpower. It's a number you've scrolled past 100 times without really reading it. $2,910 at 24.99%. That works out to $1.99 a day, not a month, a day. $2 doesn't sound like anything on its own. It's a coffee. It's less than the delivery fee you paid without thinking twice a few weeks ago. But it's $2 that shows up whether you notice it or not every day, for as long as that balance is still sitting there. The $63 a month for a better mattress is actually competing against a debt that's already quietly charging you $60 a month just to sit there being ignored. So you do the less satisfying thing. Instead of the curtains, another $85 goes toward the card at 24.99% this pay period, on top of what was already going there. The one at 16.90 stays where it is for now, untouched, because it's already the cheaper problem. There's no moment of triumph in this. No mattress. No curtains. Just a slightly smaller number on a screen, and the same tired body that was going to be tired either way, mattress or not. Which means the fight was never really about a mattress, or curtains, or Dana's wrist. It was about which version of tired you're willing to pay extra for, and which one you've decided isn't worth the interest. The debts are still there. But for the first time, they're moving in the right direction instead of just sitting there collecting whatever they feel like collecting. There's a line on every pay stub you've never actually looked at as its own thing. Night differential. $196.56 every 2 weeks, paid specifically for agreeing to be awake when the rest of the building is asleep. For years, it just disappeared into the same number everything else disappears into. Rent absorbs some, groceries absorb some. Whatever's left gets buried in the account you check every morning out of habit more than need. Which is strange when you actually stop and look at it. That $196.56 isn't compensation for anything you're spending money on. It's compensation for something you're giving up. Sleep, mostly. A normal week. The kind of Tuesday other people get to have. You never spent that money on purpose. It just went wherever the rest went. So this time, before it has the chance to disappear into anything, $190 of it goes somewhere it's never been before. Not the checking account, not the emergency fund either, that one already has a job. Somewhere new, a retirement account, opened on your phone in about 11 minutes, funded automatically the same day the differential lands. You pick something boring on purpose. A fund that just owns a small slice of thousands of companies at once. Nothing you have to watch, nothing you have to understand beyond the fact that it exists. The kind of choice nobody brags about because there's nothing to brag about. It just sits there, quietly doing the one thing money is actually supposed to do when you leave it alone long enough. Dana would probably laugh at this one too, the way Dana laughs at anything that doesn't produce something you can wear on a wrist right away. 18 payments for something you can see is one kind of math. 3.5 decades for something you can't see yet is a completely different kind. And it asks a lot more of you up front, mostly patience, which doesn't show up as a purchase anyone claps for. Nobody clips anything new to their wrist because of a retirement account. Nobody posts about it on a break. It's the quietest kind of building there is, the kind where the only proof it's working is a number you're not allowed to touch for the next 34 years. $190 every 2 weeks doesn't feel like anything close to a plan. It feels like almost nothing, honestly, next to rent, next to the cards, next to everything else on the list. $4,940 a year if you don't miss one. That's the whole commitment. Less than what the wing spends on turnover in a single quarter, and nobody in this building would blink at that number. Here's the part that doesn't feel real the first time you actually run it. Started now, left alone, growing the way markets tend to grow over 3.5 decades instead of 3.5 weeks, that same $190 every 2 weeks turns into somewhere around $633,000 by the time you're 65. You read that number twice. It doesn't match anything else on this page. It doesn't match the rent, or the cards, or the fan that broke, or the coworker with the newer car. It's not a number that exists yet. It's a number that only exists if nothing interrupts the $14 a day quietly leaving before you ever see it. You didn't feel richer making the first contribution. You felt $190 poorer that pay period, and that's the whole unglamorous truth of it. Nobody tells you that building something worth 6 figures later starts by feeling like you have less money right now, today, this exact check. That's probably why most people never start. The number now is real and small and uncomfortable. The number later is enormous and invisible and easy to not believe in, which means the actual decision was never about the market or the fund or anything happening 34 years from now. It was about whether $190 every 2 weeks mattered more sitting in a checking account you barely notice or growing in one you can't touch yet. You already know which one you picked. It's the same $196.56. It's always been. It just finally has somewhere to go. None of it needs you to remember it exists. That's the part that changed somewhere in the last several months, without you deciding it in one dramatic moment. The $150 to the account you don't check, the $190 for later. Whatever's left toward whichever card has the higher number attached to it. $906.67 a month. Total, moving on a schedule you set once and haven't touched since. Every dollar that comes in now already has a job waiting for it before it even lands, the same way a shift has an assignment before you clock in. Nothing sits around anymore long enough to go looking for trouble on its own. That's the difference nobody tells you about when they talk about budgets. Like a budget is a punishment instead of just paperwork you only have to do once. You still stand in the same parking lot at 5:41, still watch the same $1,516.32 land the same way it always has. But the 4 seconds that used to feel like the only good part are still there, and now there's nothing after them worth dreading. No math to redo, no new decision waiting to ambush you when you're least ready for it. Just an app that already knows what it's doing before you open it. You didn't notice the moment it stopped requiring willpower. There wasn't one. It just slowly stopped being a decision made every 2 weeks and became something closer to a fact about how your paycheck works. The same way taxes come out before you ever see the number, except this time, you're the one who decided where it goes. 11 months ago, this would have sounded like something other people managed to do. People with different jobs, different schedules, different lives that left more room for planning. You weren't one of those people. You worked the same 12-hour shifts, slept the same broken hours, stood in the same parking lot at 5:41. The only thing that changed was what happened to the money in the 4 seconds after it landed, and you changed that exactly once, then let it run. Here's the number that would have sounded made up 11 months ago. $3,246.18, sitting in the account built for exactly the kind of thing a fan motor turns into. That covers 1.89 months of everything if the job disappeared tomorrow and nothing else changed. Not 2 months. 1.89. You leave it at that number on purpose instead of rounding it up in your head to something that sounds more finished, because 1.89 is honest, and honest is more useful to you right now than reassuring. The cards look different too, though neither of them is gone yet. Card A, the small one, sits at $806. Card B, the one that used to cost you $2 a day just to exist, is down to $2,118. Still there. Still costing you something every single day, just less of it than before, and moving in one direction only. You used to check all of this constantly, the way you check a wound to see if it's healing. Now you go a full pay period without opening half of these accounts, not because you stopped caring, but because there's nothing urgent left to check for. You slept 11 hours last weekend without once waking up to check anything. Not because you were exhausted, though you probably were, because there was nothing left that needed checking. That's a strange thing to notice about your own life, that the biggest change in almost a year isn't a number at all. It's how rarely you think about any of this now. Somebody on the unit mentioned a trip again last week, the same way they always do, and you noticed something different about how it landed. Not smaller, not bigger either. Just separate from you in a way it never used to be, like hearing about weather in a city you don't live in anymore. It takes 1 day for a check to land in your account now. It takes 3 more for every dollar of it to already be somewhere. The fund, the card payment, the retirement account, before you've spent a single minute deciding any of it in the moment. 4 days, start to finish, and none of them require you to be awake, motivated, or even paying attention. None of this makes the job easier. The shifts are still 12 hours. The parking lot is still cold before sunrise most mornings. What's different is everything waiting on the other side of the shift, quietly finished before you even clock out. What would 11 months of one small decision, repeated without fail, actually add up to? You're not asking that as a hypothetical anymore. You're the answer. Dana's still buying things in 18 payments. That hasn't changed. And it's not really a competition. It never was. What's changed is what happens to your money in the hours you have the least control over anything, the ones that used to decide everything by accident. They don't decide anything anymore. That decision already happened, days before you got paid, the same way it always does now, except this time it was actually you who made it. Which means the only decision that was ever really yours to make already happened, 11 months ago, in about 4 seconds. And everything since then has just been the proof. $1,516.32 will land again in 14 days. Same time, same parking lot, same badge still clipped to the same scrub top. That part never changes, and it was never supposed to. What changes is everything that happens after it lands, in the 4 seconds and the 4 days that follow, quietly, without you having to be awake for most of it. You didn't need a raise. You didn't need a different job, a different schedule, or a different life that left more room for planning. You needed one decision, made once, before you were tired enough to talk yourself out of it, and then never touched again. That's the whole formula. Not exciting enough to post about, not dramatic enough for anyone to clap for it on a break. Just a number moving into 4 or 5 places before you ever get the chance to spend it on nothing. Watch what happens the next time it lands at 5:41 in whatever parking lot you happen to be standing in that morning. Whose decision is that going to be? Nobody's going to clap when you set this up either. That's fine. Clapping was never the point of any of this, and neither is being seen doing it. The people who actually build something quiet do it exactly like this. Unnoticed, one ordinary paycheck at a time, until one day the math just doesn't look like anyone else's anymore. $1,516.32. Same time, same person cashing it, just not the same 4 seconds anymore.